So we're starting the Vanishing Grace thing here. And so what this is we have this little study guide that I have. It's also online. It's on our website. And we have a video to watch and all those things. They provide way more questions than we have time to get through answers here. But this is just kind of a discussion about some of the things that you may be reading in the book. And it's a discussion about how do we better give good news out into the world. It's a discussion about that. There's a Bible study component to it as well. We have some books that were donated here. They're over there too. So if anyone needs one, you're welcome to. You don't have to read the book to keep up with the study here, but I think the book is pretty well written and kind of interesting. How far has anyone made it? Is like that?
103 pages.
103 pages. There's 97. Oh man, like that's
when
getting the star side. That's farther than I credit. So there are 4 sections to the book. The first section comprises the first 2 weeks, and then each section is a week after that. There's 5 total weeks. So like so if you want to kind of keep up like that, you're welcome to. Philip Yancey, I can't explain this on Sunday, but kind of a guy that what am I trying to say? He kind of got burned out from the church they went to in Atlanta and kind of really kind of went away from the faith. And then he kind of ended up discovering Jesus. He wrote the book, The Jesus I Never Knew. Then he wrote his next big one which was What's So Amazing About Grace. And he's written a bunch of books over the years. Jesus I Never Knew was good. We had to read it in college. I think we had to read it in seminary as well. And so it's kind of interesting book. So for the introduction here, here's kind of the introduction paragraph. As much as Christians may want others to know the good news of forgiveness and experience hope of a redeemed life, the good news isn't sounding as good to so many people these days. In fact, to some outsiders, the very word Christian arouses feelings of fear, distrust, antagonism, and hostility. It is a challenge to be salt and light to people who view Christians so negatively. All right. So here's our question. What experiences have you had with people who react negatively or suspiciously when they find out that you're a Christian? If you had such experiences, you can share them with the group. So have anyone had interactions like that?
I mean, when they pull back like this?
Yeah. It could be anything. I told about mine on Sunday. Yeah.
They also get very sarcastic.
Sarcastic? Okay, so like dealing with people who are sarcastic? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I could see that. Anyone have anything?
Well, I had a situation, a family situation, in that my daughter-in-law is from India.
Mm-hmm.
So she only acknowledges Wa.
Yeah.
And so at Thanksgiving and things like that, she was having her family, which includes my son, thank Wa.
Yeah.
And I was discussing that with someone, and I said, it really bothers me that she's so anti-Christ. And she said, well, that's really reverse bigotism for her not to be open to your religion as well.
Yeah. Like that's that's a good example. Like Lee talking about, them pulling back. I talked about mine on Sunday where I have to restart conversations with people like on the regular. And so like this, one of the things I did my class at home last night, and one of the things we kind of talked about in that one is that this is designed to not say, oh, we're doing it wrong, but it's like, how can we share grace better type of thing. If you've listened to me enough, I'm really not into like, you're doing it wrong versus over there. Like this, that we can always make things better. So that's kind of what this is about. So this is another interesting question from the book, I thought. When you engage with someone whose religious, social, or political views differ from yours, to what extent do you think the person feels accepted and valued by you? Share any experiences you may have had, and when bad feelings resulted from discussions or controversial subjects. Basically, do you think people feel valued by you if you share a different opinion?
May I share?
Yeah. I don't know, Fred.
Way back when I was a young guy.
Yeah. It's back when the world was in black and white.
Yeah. The family would go out for dinner on a Friday night,
Mm-hmm.
and invariably we lived in an area where they had fish fry,
Mm-hmm.
and I usually order a pork chop,
Oh.
and I would get a look from the
Oh.
waitress.
Okay.
What?
Yeah.
Friday night? You don't know? We have fish here because it's a Catholic area,
Oh, yeah.
and they give me a dirty look.
They give you a dirty look.
And I said,
Yeah. That's
I can think of other experiences where people of more the Baptist expression
mm-hmm.
would say, "Oh, Lutheran, same as Catholics."
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Oh,
Yeah.
not true." I could tell you, but yeah,
Yeah.
and I've experienced that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that isn't what you're talking about, is it?
No, I mean it's all related into this, because I think this is an important value for us all to kind of grasp. It's like when we disagree with somebody, can we still make them feel valued in discussion? Yeah, sure.
I think that, especially having experienced some things with family, a few things on the business level, that if whatever you say is done with respect,
Mm-hmm.
you keep that in mind, it gets it on an even keel where everybody can belong and be part of everything, as opposed to saying, I'm right
Yeah.
and you're wrong.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I've learned.
Yeah. No, totally. It's Coley said last night. So for those of you who don't know, Coley doesn't drink alcohol. And it's the reason why she doesn't drink alcohol is because she just doesn't like it. But that ends up having interesting, especially being in the South, interesting interactions with people because she's a pastor's wife. And so they'll offer something. She's like, no. And she's like, but like, it's not because I don't, like all that. It's because I just don't like it. I'm not judging you on that. But that's kind of a funny interaction. In my own life, one of the things, and we'll talk more about this. There's a reason why these books kind of that are like this, I enjoy, because I see a lot of my own faith journey kind of come out through books like this. When I first went to Bentonville, when I was first there, there was we had a DCE, and he said something that ended up kind of changing my life. I don't think he meant it to change it in the way it did, but that's how a lot of things then get changed and all that. But he said, if everyone in Northwest Arkansas decided to go to church on Sunday, there wouldn't be enough room for everybody. Now you probably heard people say this before. He kind of meant it as this big, like, we need to make sure we continue to build and, building the kingdom and all that stuff, which is fine. That's not how I took it though. And I kind of went, yeah, there's people that aren't in church on Sunday. Where are those people? What are they doing? What are they doing with their time? And because, my life is very church centric. And in Bentonville, those people were big. They were volunteering and big a part of the Parks and Rec system. Like and I was just, there weren't many churches that were involved, or Christians for that matter, involved in the Parks and Rec system. And so we went full headlong into that world. And when I started getting friends that had no connection to churches, I realized that a lot of my just everyday language would put them off. And it's just because it was, we call it Christianese type of thing. You know, just this Christian language that kind of comes out. And I worked real hard, and I'm saying the word I a lot, I hate that, but I worked real hard to get rid of all of that language that was inside of me, to the point where I have a coach, a professional coach, and he said, you should probably get some of it back because I think you're distressing your congregation over it. Because I just worked real hard to get, like, how you feeling today? Oh, I'm blessed. That's Christian language, and it can be outsiders. Now, we live in an area that's not super Christian. Like Arkansas is super Christian. So there's dividing lines. So it's not as much of an issue here, but it was just something, and I'm telling you not that you can look at me and go, look at how great and righteous he is. But to look and be like, oh yeah, I can maybe improve myself in those ways. So let's watch this video here. It's 20 minutes long. I'm going to go ahead and lay this out. It's a pretty decent video. It's the weakest video out of the 5. That's out of all the 5 videos, this is the weakest one. Next week's is really, really good. I was watching, I was like, gosh, this video is great. So as you're watching this one, understand that it is like the weakest one. So I don't know why they did that, but they did. So, all right, we will share a sound.
What's the first word you think of when I say the word Christian?
The Crusades.
Jesus Christ.
Bogus.
Conservative.
Divisive.
Religion.
Cult.
Southern religiosity.
It's an American thing.
Nothing. Religion sucks. It's all man-made. I don't believe in it.
What about evangelical Christians?
What does that mean?
Sect.
President Bush?
I've never heard of it.
Bible thumping.
I don't know.
Intense.
Tele-Christians, like people on TV preaching and taking your money.
Evangelicals tend to be more reactionary and like right wings.
Loud.
Spreading the message.
Evangelical, I don't know what that means.
Fear drives that particular religion.
Judgment, and I'm going to go to hell.
They are what they are. Practice what you preach.
Christianity is walking by faith and not by what you feel or sight around you.
That's mostly what I see in churches, like old people.
Not fair to generalize.
For good or bad, just like.
But sometimes we do because of what we've been shown by them.
Almost 20 years ago, I wrote a book called What's So Amazing About Grace? In the years since that book came out, I can truly say that grace is still as amazing as ever. However, I now sense that we've got a problem. Not a problem with God's grace, nothing wrong with that, but a problem with how Christians are conveying that grace to the world around us. In our polarized, divided world, grace seems in vanishing supply. I decided to write this book after learning about some surveys conducted by the George Barna Group. You may have heard about the rise in nuns. Now that's not N-U-N-S, the Catholic women who used to wear black and white habits. Rather, those pollsters are talking about N-O-N-E-S, people who, when you survey them and ask them about their religious commitment, they check the none box. I don't have any. This group includes atheists, agnostics, and other people who simply haven't found a spiritual home anywhere. Today, 1 out of 3 young people marked down none when asked about their faith commitment. Of course, the United States is still considered a Christian country, one of the most Christian countries on earth, but that's changing rapidly. Take a look at this chart. If you follow that top descending line, you can see the decline of faith among various age groups. On the left side, people who are over 65 usually identify themselves as Christians. The percentage goes down with each generation. For the youngest group, on the right, only 60% identify themselves as Christians. Moreover, the entire climate of the country is changing for Christians. We've all heard about court decisions to prohibit prayer in schools and ban Christian groups from university campuses or remove religious displays from public property at Christmas. Those events make the news. Meanwhile, in the broader public, a hostility toward Christians is growing. Let's go back to that group of nuns, people who claim they have no religious commitment. The Barna Group found that in 1996, which is not so very long ago, 85% of the nuns still viewed Christianity favorably. They weren't committed, but they had an overall respect for Christians. That figure has taken a dramatic plunge among younger people who have no religious commitment. Just 13 years later, only 16% of those younger people had a favorable impression of Christians, and only 3% had a good impression of evangelicals. If you doubt this trend, I encourage you to try a test for yourself sometime. Go up to some casual acquaintances and ask a question like this. When I say the word Christian, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Or what does the word evangelical mean to you? You better brace yourself because you may get an earful. When I've tried it, say with my seatmates on an airplane, I usually hear the word anti. Christians are anti-homosexual, anti-evolution, anti-abortion. The list goes on. Of course, those are important issues worth debating, but you can relax. We're not going to be discussing them in this series. Instead, we will focus on why so many people have a negative reaction to the Christian faith. Why doesn't it sound like good news? And then, what can we do about it? Where does all the hostility come from? To find out, we went to visit Gabe Lyons. As a student at Liberty University, which was founded by Jerry Falwell, Gabe had firsthand experience with Christians and their involvement in politics and the backlash that can produce. Later, he worked with the Barna Group to co-author a best-selling book called Unchristian: What a New Generation Really Thinks About Christianity and Why It Matters. He went on to write a second book called The Next Christians, and he founded a series of conferences called the Q Conference. They explore how to mobilize Christians to live out their faith in a healthy way. He made some conclusions about what we're doing wrong and how we can do it better.
Christianity's growth has not been happening in America. It's been in decline for the last 30 years. And so we're now in this moment where people are longing for something more, but the Christian story is not the one they're interested in. So this younger group of people basically see the church, Christianity, religion in general as being really bad for the world. They think it's what's leading us to wars, to intolerance, to not being inclusive and accepting of other people. And so the church has to confront that head on and recognize that that's the perception that people have. That doesn't mean we as the church can change what we believe about the world, how we express what we believe, but we can be sensitive to the fact that we need to acknowledge where we've been wrong. What things have we turned into religion that had nothing to do with what Jesus was about? You think of the perceptions that have turned people away from church, being judgmental, being too political, being sheltered. None of this describes Jesus. This describes a religious structure. This describes more the Pharisaical church that Jesus had to encounter and confront, not the real church that Jesus was trying to build. to connect with a group of people that are pretty cynical about your faith. I think the next step is you want them to move from cynical to skeptical, and probably from skeptical to curious. And so one of our goals just has to be, what would make people curious about the Christian faith again? And I think the way we do that is we get back to the historic ideas that over 2,000 years have always made the Christian faith show up in society as something that's life-giving. You know, we have a vision for how human beings do best, how we flourish in our work, our life, our relationships, our families. We need to offer that vision again, not in a way that's condemning people who don't want to follow it, but in a way that's giving life in our churches for people can bear witness to these great ideas. You know, Christians historically have been known to be the first in line to fight injustice. We need to keep doing that. The church is doing good at that right now. We need to keep pushing into that. This starts to demonstrate to people that the church isn't just about building itself up. It's about actually doing something that's incredibly loving, which is to go fight against those things that are trying to wipe out people who are good or to violently take away their rights. And so it's these kinds of examples that will actually give hope and make people, I think, curious again to go, what is this whole Christian talk all about? I don't believe the future is going to be the church that's, you know, we show up at church and we're entertained with the rock band and the light show and the big screens. I don't know that that's where this is going. I think we're in a place now culturally where people are looking for a church that's asking something of them. It's not just to serve the church, but it's to say, how are you going to live this out in the place you've already been called? So whether you're a business executive, a teacher, whether you're a homeschooling mom, what is it that God wants to do right where you're at? And churches who can answer that question, disciple their people towards that, are going to be the churches that matter. And they won't be churches that are just about Sunday morning experiences. They're going to be churches that have to be a part of your life, where the fabric of your life is made up of needing one another in community. And I think we'll find in the coming days that churches who are doing that, who are engaging their people, telling the stories of their congregations, making it about all of us as the church, not just about a few great communicators or a few great singers or performers. I think we're going to find a church that all of a sudden gets into a place where it can start to flourish again. I love Philip's concept of grace dispensers because it's active. It explains that we have to be active with our faith. This isn't just a set of beliefs. We need to be doing wherever God's called us. And the grace that he describes isn't just a grace that's only about salvation that takes us out of this world and into heaven, but it's a common grace. It's a grace that also benefits this world. And as we as Christians start to live in that way, we start to help other people understand why they exist, what their life's about, why we're all here. We start to answer the biggest questions that people in the world are asking because we understand how big God's grace is, but we also are doing it. It's active. It's no longer just talking.
I got a good dose of the hostility out there a few years ago when I was asked to write an article in the Huffington Post on the topic, "What good is God?" I described the difference that God can make on 3 different levels. First, God transforms individuals. As a journalist and writer, I've heard stories from alcoholics, prostitutes, and members of the lower castes in India who have been completely transformed. For example, I once met with a group of 100 women who were rescued from sexual trafficking by Christian ministries working in different countries. Trust me, most prostitution in the world is not like you see on TV shows about Las Vegas. Tell me your stories, I asked the women, and for almost 3 hours I heard them give wrenching accounts of shame, degradation, and abuse. I remember one story in particular. It came from a woman in Bulgaria. Her English was not so good. "Everybody, she have somebody look down on," she said. "Not us. We are at the low." Nobody mother say to her, "Honey, when you grow up, I want you be best prostitute in town. Most families, they ashamed of us. But sometime, when you are at the low, you cry for help." She went on to tell how Christian missionaries reached out to her, rescued her, gave her shelter, trained her in a job. This woman was utterly transformed. Now she runs her own ministry to prostitutes. The gospel doesn't just affect individuals, though. Christians can create a caring community. In my article, I mentioned that churches that responded after Hurricane Katrina, they kept on operating shelters and food kitchens and continued to rebuild houses long after the government programs had shut down. In fact, wherever I go in the world, after a natural disaster, I find Christians there on the front lines reaching out with practical help. Individuals, community. Finally, I mentioned a third level. The Christian faith eventually transforms entire societies, usually from the bottom up. Jesus said it works like the smallest seed in the garden. In time, it grows into a great tree, and the birds of the air come and perch in its branches. I've seen this process at work. I've traveled to Scandinavian countries, for example, and every time I come back impressed. People there are honest. You never have to count your change after buying something, unlike some countries I visited. Scandinavians are charitable. They're right at the top of the list of countries that give economic aid. They care about the environment. They take care of the weak and vulnerable. You don't find slums or very many poor people in a country like Sweden, and they welcome with open arms refugees from places such as Iraq and Syria. Well, the first time I visited Sweden, I happened to be reading a book on European history. I learned that for several hundred years, many prayers in Europe ended with this phrase, "Lord, save us from the Vikings. Amen." What happened to transform a race of warring and pillaging Vikings into modern-day Sweden, Norway, Denmark? The gospel happened. It took several centuries, but eventually the gospel transformed an entire culture. I wrote about each one of these levels, individuals, community, entire societies, in the article for the Huffington Post. And I thought I made some good points. My, what a firestorm of responses I got. Let me read you some of the comments posted by readers. No good God would allow some of the things going on around us. Assuming there is a God, He doesn't do any of us any good at all. God makes waffle batter fluffy. His only power, little known fact. The question for evangelical ministers isn't whether there is or isn't a God or whether God matters. The question for their flock simply is, where's the money? Show me the money. Religion and a nickel will get you a cup of coffee. I have asked the what good is God question many times, and I've always come to the conclusion that God either does not care or does not exist. Some responders got more personal, such as the one who posted about my near-fatal auto accident. He needs his neck broken, I think. Too bad he didn't die before writing such a pathetic article. Or the one who said about my photo, the guy looks like a wacko like all evangelicals. See what I'm talking about? No, of course, not every non-Christian is hostile to the faith. Some who may fall into the category of nuns may be outsiders to the faith, but they're open. Perhaps they're even seeking. A lonely single person in the city, or young parents who are looking for some guidance on how to raise their children, somebody going through a health crisis or a recent divorce. People like that may have no inbuilt hostility to the Christian message, and indeed, when they hear it, it may sound like good news. But there's the other category, post-Christians. No doubt you picked up some of their hostility when I read responses to my article. To them, Christianity is bad news, not good news. As we meet together in the next sessions, we'll take a good look at what lies behind their negative feelings. Why has the climate of faith changed so dramatically in recent years? And what adjustments should we make if we want to communicate good news to a thirsty world, even to those who may not know they thirst? In this first meeting, I hope that you can share together some of your own experiences. What reactions have you gotten from neighbors and friends who find out you're a Christian? Or perhaps you've been turned off by some individual Christians or by churches. And in the next sessions, we'll dig deeper and explore ways to communicate faith to a culture that seems to be running away from it.
I think one of the great opportunities in our moment right now is to recognize that God's up to something. He's still moving. He's not wringing his hands wondering what happened to American culture. No, there's a huge opportunity happening right now, but it starts with us as Christians and the church regaining confidence that what we believe really is good news for the world. We've been told by a lot of people it's bad news because it's telling people what they shouldn't be doing or rules they need to be following. But the reality is this is the best news in the world for a human being. And so we just need to get better at not only believing it, but knowing how to share it. Share it in a way that relates to the real challenges people are having in every area of life and help them see how the way the world ought to be is actually what God wants to use us to help bring to be. So I think that's the opportunity, and I think the church's confidence will be a big step forward to us being able to demonstrate and express it.
We got Zoom. Hello, welcome. Oh, you're fine.
Eggs for my car.
Oh, man. And remind me what your name is again? Ann? All right. Well, welcome, Ann. Welcome. See, I'm glad I put us out here. Yeah, like that. We would have been very packed in the little room if you had just like that. So we have lots more room out here. So, all right. So yeah, we have that video. Now, I have a reading from Vanishing Grace. You don't have to open it up to this, but it's on page 70. It says, Jesus had an uncanny ability to look at everyone with grace-tinted eyes, see not only the beauty of who they were, but also the sacred potential of what they could become. We, his followers, have that same challenge. So from now on, we regard no one from a worldly point of view. That's in Corinthians from Paul. Evidently, we are not doing likewise, since many people think of faith, especially the evangelical faith, bad news. They believe Christians view them through eyes of judgment, not eyes of grace. Somehow we need to reclaim good news of the gospel. So, in the video, they talked extensively about the nuns, N-O-N-E-S. Have you guys ever heard of that before? Have you ever heard that? Never heard that before? Did it make sense? Like what he's talking about? Like, do what?
What did you just say?
In the video we just watched, right in the beginning of it, they were talking about some research that was done by the Barna Group. And they talk about this research that was released, and it was about the nuns. Not nuns like Catholic nuns. N-O-N-E-S. And it's basically people, when they survey them, it's like, what's your religious affiliation? And they say, I've got none. And that has really, come on, Ed. Come on. There you go. Focus good. Funny kid you are. Like that. But so they said that there's this rise in this. And like this to me says a lot, like I'm very familiar with it. It's all that research that he was talking about came out my first year of seminary. So can you imagine what we talked about in seminary? Like that's all that research came out during that. So like it's very familiar with it. I even led a little board discussion on the book he was talking about in my vicarage congregation. Like that's because it was it really pushed against a lot of the thinking in that time. And this series came out 3 years after that. This came out in 2013. So that's, add those years, it's about 10 years old now. But to what degree have you found these trends about the nuns to be true with your own interactions with people?
May I?
Yeah.
I've thought about this, and I'm a little older. And
yes,
I
we know.
When I was a boy, and I lived in the city of Buffalo in an ethnic neighborhood. And I remember I could go down my street up and down and like this, and I could see, well, this family goes over to St. Agnes. Oh, this family, they're Lutheran like me, but they go to a different one, and so on. And very few Baptists, Catholic, Lutheran, ENR, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew they belonged to a church.
Yeah.
They were a member of some church. I could probably tell with their, I talk with their kids, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if I went down up and down my street right now, well, number one, I probably wouldn't know all the people.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, I bet half of them would say none.
Yeah.
I would just just seems like it. When did this happen?
Yeah.
Did it happen when I went to Concordia?
Well, related to what you just said, I grew up in Jacksonville, and you would find pockets, much like you do in Atlanta, where people of certain religions tended to congregate based on the church that they wanted to attend.
Well, the church used to be the focal point of your social life at one time too.
Yeah, but that was even me as a child. I'm not quite as old as you.
Not quite. Easy there.
Esther?
No, seriously, I grew up in a town of 38,000 people, and I don't think there were 50 that didn't go to church.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't, because everybody I knew went to a church or a synagogue, but you know, everybody. But today, I live in a neighborhood where there's 10 families that are very close, right in my neighborhood. Chris knows this. And 3 of us go to church. 2 happen to go here.
Yeah. That's true. That's Emily. Like she sits in the back with her 3 adorable kids. Yeah.
Pastor?
Yeah.
Isn't part of the problem that our culture is in part teaching this identity where everything is you? You go to the right school, you become successful, you know, someone who paints and becomes a great artist, and they'll interview them and it's your talent. It's never God gave me this talent or God permits me to do. It's all me. I did it by myself. So who needs God?
Yeah, it could be like a hyper, what has helped us get us here, it could be like a hyper individualism. And we see, well, and that's, so if we take Lee's point and go further there on to the next questions, you see American evangelicalism has really become like a personal faith and not so much of a communal faith, you know, like that's where it's like, do you accept Jesus type of thing. You really see that, you know, with our Baptist friends and that stream of evangelical, because you got to define what you mean by evangelical too.
What is evangelical?
The classic definition of it is an evangelistic group of Christians. So one that focuses on evangelism. Now, evangelicals become a voting bloc and like all that stuff. That definition doesn't really pertain too much in anymore for it. It still can, but you just have to weed through. There's a lot of weeds amongst the chaff and all that stuff, you know.
I think most people think of evangelicals as people who try to shove it down your throat.
Yeah. Like that. So to go with that, we go to this next question. What do you think may be reasons some people perceive the good news of the gospel as bad news? Does that make sense? Well, does anyone have any ideas?
My thoughts about this whole conversation are people are putting none down. What do they belong to?
Nothing.
They should belong to God in my head, but they don't think that. So how do we get a magnet into belonging to God as it should be, as it is, so they recognize that and have it not be a bad thing?
Yeah, and that's what this whole thing's about. Like that.
Well,
Yeah.
I think if they see the belonging part, if they find how much they truly do belong to God in a way, and not be judgmental about those that are trying to tell them this. There's a way to do it without, as he said, shoving it down their throat.
So
people have preconceived ideas sometimes, or they've had experiences that where they get to have that, and it's like, yeah, okay, this sounds good, but hey, what about this and that? And like we said too, talking about the power of the media. You see the bad stuff on television. I mean, once in a while you'll see the good in the Christian missionaries. And the people in Africa, you see so much bad, like what the evangelicals do. These people went out and killed people. You see, that's a lot of it too.
Definitely.
And somewhere in the very first chapter, it said something about, it was an old Quaker saying, I have to go back there to get it exactly, but it's like, if I don't know anything about you, I don't like you type of thing.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I remember that. It was I remember reading that. I can't remember the exact quote either, but I remember reading that.
But churches aren't the only ones having this problem. You take the service clubs like the Elks and the Moose and the Eagles or Chamber of Commerce. They're all having the same problem.
Yeah, they're
shutting down their buildings and everything. Nobody wants to join together and help.
Yeah. Well, and so I kind of think that it may be all similar issues going on, it's kind of like what Gabe Lyon said at the very end, that it's like, are we giving them this vision of that they can help, or have we kind of stifled it away? I don't know. As for good and bad news that you talked about, this is kind of one of my big ideas, and I'm really happy that they're picking it up because it brings legitimacy to me. But that there's a lot of times when we'll call things good news in the church, and we'll communicate those outside people. They're not necessarily good news to them. That's, if our message of salvation is, you better repent or burn type of thing, it doesn't feel good to a lot of people. It's like, oh, hold on, what? Yeah, type of thing. And then you look around and you look at how we have allegiance to politics over anything else. A lot of times those turn or burn things they have more to do with people, how they want you to act, rather than anything that matters of faith or what Jesus was saying. And people are like, you're a surface level. You're just, you don't care about me. You just care about controlling me. And I kind of, with Fred talking about the other service organizations, I'm wondering if they've had a similar messaging where it's like people have come in like, you don't want me here, that's tough. That's tough.
Well, and I think to the end of what you stated before, just like when my late husband and I moved to the area, we moved in an area based on the school district. And I don't know, going back to what I said, growing up in a large city where you would be much more blended than a situation like yours. I think that some people are also looking at the churches and saying, well, that one's got a great preschool program, and that one's got a great Alzheimer's unit, and that one's known for their work with, Boy Scouts. So sometimes, I don't know, you have to bait the hook, I guess.
Well, yeah. So you want to say something, Carol? Did you want to say it?
Yes, I forgot. Well,
yes, but I forgot.
a lot of the problem. A lot of the problem at our church anyway has come about because so many women have to work now. And so they're both gone all day. They only have the night to do their kid things and all that. They don't have time to come and, I mean, unless you had something where the kids could be involved and it's a whole family thing. But it's just not enough time in a day for a lot of these people.
We do things primarily on Sundays here with kids. Like it's because the time's already scheduled.
But at home, you got soccer games, you got all this other stuff on Sunday.
There's a lot of that, and there's a lot of competition, and so for the time. So what I would like to do is we'll continue going on forward here through like the Bible study part of this, and we'll probably run a little over, but I'd like to do some of the Bible study part here. That's all right. That's all right. We'll talk about chapter 8 later.
I'm looking at the band, the LWNL banner, and I'm thinking somehow connected with what we do in love is the magnet.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, and that's what we're talking about. That this coming next week is big on love. On Vanishing Grace on page 26, again, you can just listen to it. The issue is not whether I agree with someone, but rather how I treat someone with whom I profoundly disagree. We Christians are called to use the weapons of grace, which means treating even our opponents with love and respect. As usual, Jesus shows us the way. So this last Sunday, we talked about the Samaritan woman at the well, and there's all these stories about Samaritans and they nursed grudges with the Jews and the Samaritans and all that. And so I'm going to point out some of those nursed grudges because I kind of think they're funny. So the first one, we're going to go through these fast, but John 8:48 is, and we're going to be moving around too. So John 8:48 is, then the Jews answered and said to him, Jesus, do we not say rightly that you are a Samaritan and have a demon? Like, so what I think is funny about that is that Jesus has upset them. And so they come out with the two biggest things that they can about how they dislike who he is and what he's done. It's like, you're a Samaritan and a demon, like that's over there. So like they didn't like him at all. Like I've heard some people use their opposite political party in the same kind of sense, right? Like it's you're part of the forward party. How dare you? Like that. So I don't pick on anybody here. And so the next one is did you want to say something?
Yeah, just an aside.
Yeah.
I opened this Bible up when I got here, and it just happened to just open it anywhere. And it's open to Matthew chapter 7.
Like that's like, and that's like, yeah. I mean, it's all over the place if you let it. And that's our gospel reading today is for the Sunday is on all of this. Luke chapter 9 verses 51 through 54. You can actually go there if you want. We'll be here for a second. Luke chapter 9, verses 51 and kind of following. And what this one is, I kind of alluded to this in the sermon on Sunday, but we didn't really talk about it. And now it came to pass, this is verse 51. Now it came to pass when the time had come for him to be received up, that he steadfastly set his face to go to Jerusalem and sent messengers before his face. And as they went, they entered a village of the Samaritans to prepare for him. But they did not receive him because his face was set for the journey to Jerusalem. All right. So what's going on here with setting up the scene is Jesus is like, all right, I need to be going to Jerusalem, goes to Samaria. They're not big fans of Jerusalem. No, why do you want to go there? Like that. That's like just stay here. So they don't accept him. In response to this, verse 54, and when his disciples, James and John, saw this, they said, Lord, do you want us to command fire to come down from heaven and consume them, just as Elijah did? Like they hate the Samaritans so much. They're like, it would be nothing for us just to call, but I'm sure the Lord will listen to us, Jesus. Like he doesn't like the Samaritans either. Right? Like they did not like him. So Jesus, verse 55, Jesus turned and rebuked them and said, you do not know what manner of the spirit you are of, for the Son of Man did not come to destroy men's lives, but to save them. And they went to another village. That, I think, is an important idea as we talk about what good news is. I think many times, at least what I've heard, because I hear this from a bunch of people, that people will want to destroy people in order to kind of build them up. Type of language. And we'll call that good news because we're trying to save them. But I kind of think in that destruction, people may view it as bad news. And so this is something I just kind of haphazardly kind of fell into over the years, where it's like, let's just let good news be good news. That's like, what can we do to make good news good news? So that's, so we had all those things. Moving forward, everyone in Jesus' day knew the Samaritans, rabbis and Levites, who they were, and how they lived together. Think about the story of the Good Samaritan along the road, and how the guy was robbed and beaten up and left for dead, type of thing. And the Levite passed him, rabbis passed him, all these people passed him, but the righteous one was the Samaritan. Now think about how what we've discussed about the Samaritans, how much they were hated. How much they were hated. And what Jesus is saying there, it's pretty cataclysmic. And we won't have to talk about it publicly here, but think about what groups that would be in other groupings where what Jesus could use today. That would be equally cataclysmic, that the righteous one is this one over here. And Jesus is forcing the people to go, who is righteous in this story? And like the Samaritan, that's like that. So think about the groups that we have today around. It's kind of a fun exercise.
I got
think
one
about
in mind here, right in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
We have Swedes and Finns.
Swedes and Finns.
Swedes don't like Finns.
Yeah.
Who'd have thought?
Yeah.
That wouldn't matter. Of course, the Germans.
Yeah.
Special case. They don't like anybody.
Where are you from in the UT?
Oh, that's her family. They're from Ironwood.
Ironwood and Bessemer.
From Michigan.
Oh,
not
the relatives there. Yeah.
Yeah, the relatives.
The relatives. She has relatives there.
What's your favorite?
So then we got to a story that we talked about on Sunday, the Samaritan. And there's a couple of things that are interesting about that story. Jesus engages her, but we can't forget that she's not righteous at all. The good Samaritan, yes, he's the righteous one, but she is not. She's fulfilling every stereotype of the Jews would have for Samaritans. She's and that's an important distinction to remember, because it's so easy for the people that we may like, those nuns, those people that don't go to church anywhere, they're just selfish and awful and living lives that just only serve themselves, type of thing. It's easy to go there, but Jesus still engaged. And then you notice what she did as Jesus is engaging and talking with her. She tried to make it about these divisive issues. It's like, well, my people we want to worship on the mountain, but over here, and your people say this over here. And Jesus, he talks about it for a second, and then he goes into a unifying statement that there's a time coming when we will worship in spirit and truth. He didn't take the bait. And that's hard when someone that you're talking to engages you in some way and they want you to take the bait. Be like Jesus. Don't take the bait. You don't have to be correct in this thing. Because I think the correct thing in this, leading into what we're going to talk about this coming week, is continuing to show them love and grace. That ends up being the correct answer, rather than trying to stroke our own egos and I think that's kind of what that story of the Good Samaritan says, because you see what happens when she runs home and she tells everyone, it's like, this guy knew everything about me. And yet still showed me, she'll show me this grace and all of that. Like I made the joke on Sunday, but if you guys knew everything about me, I'd be running for the hills. Be taking calls to Dahlonega and stuff like that, like you guys knew everything about me. But that's, so I resemble that. But it's true though, right?
Yes.
And so I've always been amazed at that statement, that's in there, that he knew everything, and yet it didn't matter. And like you hear these nuns talk, and they don't want us to know anything about them because we're worried that it'll matter everything to us. And that's hard to recognize. And you look at even our churches, it's hard for that to recognize. You would like to say something.
I even noticed that I have several neighbors that I talk with frequently, and we party together and what have you.
Party?
Oh yeah, you come too. They say, "Oh yeah, I'm Catholic. I'm Catholic," but their car's in the driveway every Sunday morning.
Has anyone ever gone out and asked a group of people what really matters to them about spirituality?
That's a good practice, Cheryl. That's a good practice. A
lot of people might not know what you mean by spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
they wouldn't have any
idea.
It's any of those things where you can engage the people around you. Like that's, and the reason why I talk about that and then come at it from just all I want to do is learn. Getting into next week, I'd be careful. Like all I want to do is learn about you. Like you're not a project to me, because we constantly make, it's next week. We constantly make people into projects, like that's, and it's like, I'm here to fix you. And people can tell when you're trying to fix something. That's perfect. Yeah. Like that's, people can tell. So to kind of close with our last little things here is the Hebrews verse we talked about on Sunday. Hebrews 12, 14 through 15 said, "Make every effort to live in peace with all men, to be holy. Without holiness, no one will see the Lord. See to it that no one misses the grace of God." And the example the author of Hebrews gives is of Esau, Jacob's brother, going absolutely mad when he loses his blessing because of he sold the suit, for a suit and all these things. And the author of Hebrews is like, Esau was shown no grace in any of that. And you saw the damage that it did for that family for years and years and years. And so, he's bringing it into, see to it that no one misses the grace of God. To keep to help people see, continue to show grace, and so that's kind of what we're talking about as we continue. Yeah, Lee.
A question: how do you show grace to someone who refuses not only not to listen, they just lets it, you're non-existent anymore.
I think you still continue to engage them as people.
I'm talking about total, like I don't exist.
Well, I mean, some people you just gotta be like, well, yeah, I'm not gonna be able to do anything with you.
So it's just.
Yeah, like that's, and you kind of agree to part ways or anything or something like that. Like that's, I think there's precedent for that too, because that's
Shake the dust off.
Yeah, shake the dust off. Because I think like there's some people that, and I know this is surprising, that just don't like me.
No, I don't believe that.
I'm surprised. Like that's, but that's, it's kind of like, well, so but they may like Fred or Ed or Pam or, anything like that, like that's why we're better together when it comes to this stuff, because you all have different life experiences than I do. You all have different shades of the faith than I do. And you're gonna have better relationships with the people around you. So when you're going out there, just giving them good news. It's like, and the way he puts it in the book, and I like this a lot. Give them good news. Let Jesus work it out. And we could just be dispensers of that good news. And it's a muscle. Let me tell you this as we close here. It's a muscle to be able to give good news to people. And when you allow that muscle to work, where the good news that God is giving us isn't dependent on whether they believe it or not, because that's a muscle that we've gotten exercised as American Christians over and over and over again. It's like, well, if you believe, then God will save you, type of languages. But if you can start exercising that muscle of God's graces for people, and all of that, you start exercising that, then the words that are coming out are just good news, even for people that don't believe. And they may still not believe like you do, but they're not being offended by what you say, because it's like, hey, it's good news. And they understand that you believe that, and it's non-threatening. So we're going to work on that as we continue going here, because it's not about what you've been doing that's wrong. It's about how can we do it better. So, yeah.
How far do you want us to read for next week?
Into the first section. So there's 4 sections. So you look in the front. 4 sections. Where's that? Through chapter 4, right? Yeah, chapter 4. So yeah, 4 through chapter 4. So you have the grace dispensers will be like week 3. Which I really like those as pilgrim activists and artists. I relate strongly to that stuff. And so yeah. But what? Yeah, you can have that. You can have that.
I'll just give you the one when I get it.
Yeah, do whatever you like. Put my book. Oh yeah, don't put your book over there. But so there,
With what Fred was saying
yeah.
too. I was in a volunteer fire department. 8,000 people in the town. We had over 300 very active volunteers when I was there. The department is now fully paid. There are no volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's not unusual at all.
Yeah.
So
It's almost the difference from farmer's mentality to what it is now, I think, in a lot of places.
Different though. Since I was a kid, here too. Been, what, 3 or 4 weeks now? Yeah. Not mental.
So this is the study guide here. The study guide. In the back of the study guide, you have, it says personal reflection. This section, well, the whole study guide for this week is up on our website under this. If you want to go through the personal reflection part, it's up on the website. You can just go into it and you can see it right there. And that's how it'll be every week. Or you're welcome to buy the book as well. I'll put that all that stuff on the old site. So you're welcome to go through that. And it's a couple pages back here. So thank you so much. And for everyone that's on the YouTubes, thanks for joining us. So